Hi Gomes graduates, and welcome to yet another week of remote learning. This is our video for Monday, and we are going to talk about another ELA concept, and we're going to do a nice little review. So last week we talked about plot, we talked about point of view, and we talked about theme. This week our focus is going to be on figurative language. So Monday's video, this one, we are going to be talking about 3 different types of figurative language, and then for Wednesday's video we're going to be talking about 3 different types. And make sure that you're using the videos to help you with your MyOn projects. Those are projects that we expect that you're getting done. So a lot of your questions can be answered in these videos. That's why we make them. So make sure that you're watching the video, and if you have a question on your MyOn project, re-watch the video and then ask your teacher. Don't just sit there and struggle or just give up, okay? So we're trying to make these as interesting as possible. So this week's focus is going to be on poetry, since we are working with figurative language. So the 3 types of figurative language that we are going to talk about today are similes, metaphors, and last but not least, alliterations. So we know that a simile is when you compare 2 seemingly different things using the word like or as in order to describe something. So in one case, we could say, Mr. Hill is as tall as a tree. Or we could say, Mr. Hill is as tall like a tree. Mr. Hill's not really as tall as a tree, but he is really, really tall. So the picture in our mind that comes up by using this type of figurative language, using these similes, is that Mr. Hill is really tall. Another way to use figurative language would be with the metaphors. So instead of saying Mr. Hill is as tall as a tree, using that as word as our simile, we could just take that out and we could make it a metaphor. So I could say, Mr. Hill is a tree. He's not really a tree, right? But if I'm describing his height, I know that he's pretty tall because trees are pretty tall. Our last one is alliteration. And alliteration adds a little bit of spice to your sentences, especially when you're using poetry or when you really want to get a point across. So I could say, Mr. Hill's height is higher than 100 hills. So for an alliteration, we know that we're using the same beginning sound very close together. So I have the sound that the H makes in this case. So hill, height, higher, 100, hills. That's 5 sounds in one sentence. So that is an example of an alliteration. Let's take a second and stop and do a quick review. Next, I'm going to read a paragraph with you. It's kind of like a fairy tale paragraph, and it seems sort of like Cinderella, but it's not. And what you need to do as I'm reading it is I need to have you keep an eye out for examples of similes, metaphors, and alliterations. And just as a hint, there are 2 similes, 1 metaphor, and 2 alliterations within this paragraph. So keep an eye out while I read.
Tonight was the night she had been waiting for. Princess Penelope was head over heels for Prince Patrick, and she had finally persuaded her father to allow her to attend the royal ball. She could hardly wait. Upon hearing the news, Penelope had sprinted like a cheetah all the way down to the royal dress shop to pick out the perfect dress. As she searched through the racks, each dress seemed to shudder with excitement, waiting to be chosen. Glancing around, Penelope's eyes landed on the most beautiful dress ever made. The dress was a sparkling ruby, as it reflected light from every angle. Penelope thought the dress must be the color of Dorothy's slippers. Trying on the new dress, Penelope knew it was meant to be worn by her. Now, at the ball, her dress swished as she passed the prince. When she turned around, she found his eyes fixed on her like laser beams. Your challenge is to find one example of a simile, metaphor, or alliteration that you noticed within the paragraph. Remember, there are 2 similes, 1 metaphor, and 2 alliterations.
So for your Mayan project this week, it's really centered around poetry. There's going to be one book that everyone needs to read. That book is called You Can Write Cool Poems, because as part of your project, you are going to be creating your own poem. So this book should help you to create the poem. So you need to read that book first. After that, you have an option of a different books to choose from, okay? There are different types of poetry books that I had put. You only need to pick one. So you have one book everyone has to read, and then you have another book that is a choice, but you have to read 2 books. From there, while you're reading your choice book, you need to find 5 pieces of figurative language, and you need to add that to your writing. So jot down somewhere, whether it's on your book, on a piece of paper, what type of figurative language you found. And you're going to add that to a writing piece. It's just 5 pieces of figurative language. At the end, you're going to create your own poem. So you have to read 2 books, find 5 pieces of figurative language, and create your own poem. It's not that much work. It shouldn't take you more than the week to complete. You also need to make sure that you have turned in the Mayan projects from the previous weeks. These are projects. They are assignments. They are not choices. So please, if you have not gotten those projects done, make sure that you are working on those as well. Remember, you are still getting graded on the work you do. So if you are choosing to sit there and not do the work, that's one thing. If you are struggling, that is when you need to reach out to your teachers, whether it be your 5th grade classroom teacher, whether it's Mrs. Bell or Mrs. Vera Griffin or Mr. C. You need to reach out to someone if you are struggling. That also means that if you are struggling, that you have actually read the books, you have looked at the assignments, and then you reach out. Do not reach out and ask for help if you haven't even looked at the project, okay? So please make sure you're working. Those of you who are working, you are doing such a nice job. We are incredibly proud of you. Keep up the good work. And the rest of you, step it up. See you guys Wednesday.